Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Ballabha Girivardhari Gopijana Ballabha Girivardhari Nandana Brajana Rangana Yamuna Tira Vanasadi Bhakti Vedanta Namini Namini Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prasarine Nirvese Sasunyagari Pasajari Sakarine Namaste Saraswati Devi Nipacharine Nirvese Sasunyagari Pasajari Sakarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Sivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Come on. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. 1, 2, 3. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Nitai Gaura Haribo, Nitai Gaura. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very much, very nice. Another glass in there. This I cannot pour, you know. There must be another glass in there. If I would. Okay. Don't look. This is glass I can pour. Look away, close your eyes. There is a famous bishop in South Africa, and he told also about closing eyes. He said, when the Christian missionaries arrived in Africa, they had the Bibles and we had the land. So they said, let us pray, please close your eyes. And we opened our eyes, they had the land and we had the Bibles. You understand? Before they had the Bibles, we had the land. After closing the eyes and praying, they had the land and we had the Bibles. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, it's not pure devotional service exactly. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. My computer. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. You can cut that for now. Hare Krishna. So, okay. Brashyati anusmitish chitam brasmatyat nu smitish chitam jnana brahmsha smiti saye tadrodam kavaya prabhu tadrodam kavaya prabhu Atmapanavam atmanaha Nasyat janusmiti chitam Jnana brahmsha smiti kshaye Tadrodam kavaya prahur Atmapanavam atmanaha. Somebody?
Shatyanusmitishchittam Jnanadham shasmatikshaye Tadrodham kavaya prahur Atmanaha.
Any lady? Brashyati becomes destroyed. Anusmriti, constantly thinking. Chittam, consciousness. Jnana Brahmsha, bereft of real knowledge. Smriti Kshaye, by destruction of remembrance. Tadrodham, choking, that process. Kavayaha, great learned scholars. Prabhu, have opinion. Atma, of the soul. Apanavam, destruction. Atmanaha, of the soul. When one deviates from his original consciousness, he loses the capacity to remember his previous position or to recognize the present one. When remembrance is lost, all knowledge acquired is based on a false foundation. When this occurs, learned scholars consider that the soul is lost. Purport. The living entity or soul is ever existing and eternal, it cannot be lost. But learned scholars say that it is lost when actual knowledge is not working. That is the difference between animal and human being. According to less intelligent philosophers, animals have no soul. But factually, animals have soul. Due to the animals' gross ignorance, however, it appears that they have lost their soul. Without the soul, a body cannot move. That is the difference between the living body and the dead body. When the soul is out of the body is already called dead. The soul is said to be lost when there is no proper knowledge exhibited. Our original consciousness is Krishna consciousness because we are part and parcel of Krishna. When this consciousness is misguided and one is put into material atmosphere which pollutes the original consciousness, one thinks that he is a product of the material elements. Thus one loses his real remembrance of his position as a part and parcel of Supreme God, as much as a man who sleeps forgets himself. In this way, when the activities of the proper soul, of proper consciousness are checked, all the activities of the lost soul are performed on the false basis. At the present moment, human civilization is acting on a false platform of bodily identification. Therefore, it can be said that the people of the present age have lost their soul, and in this respect they are no better than animals. So, Amagyanti Vidandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshun Vritam Yina Tasmai Siguravinva Si Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitamina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeyam Siguru Siyuta Padakamalam Sigurun Vaishnavam Cha Sirupam Sagajatan Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadu Tapai Jana Saitam Krishna Chaitana Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shishakamitam Shah Hey Krishna Kauna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpati Gopasha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namasute Tapta Kanchana Gurangi Radhe Vindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sudevi Pranamami Hari Priya Panchakalpatruvya Shah Kripa Sindhaveva Cha Patitam Pavani Vaishnavima Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Grata Sri Go Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram Hare Krishna. So this is a very important verse because that is a situation in the material world. When we descend from the spiritual world, we come into this situation, when we deviate from our original consciousness, that we lose the capacity to remember our previous position, namely as a servant of Krishna in the spiritual world. Forget about it. Every one of us has been in the spiritual world at one stage, Prabhupada said. Bhaktivinoda Thakur also. And we don't remember. We take something with us, namely the idea that we are the body. Because in the spiritual world, everybody is his body. There's no difference between body and soul. So that we take with us, and so we think here we are the body. That's where it comes from. And in the spiritual world, there's so much happiness. And we take that with you. With us also. There's Ananda, but here in this material world, it is limited. There is some happiness, but it's limited happiness. You know, people think they're very happy, whereas they're suffering. I remember one time we came from Sankirtan. We had a brand new car. Actually, somebody lent us his car. It was a fairly nice car, big car. And we drove by on the street. There was some building work, and the workers, they were standing in sewer. The sewer pipe broke up to here. You know, they had these coats. They were standing up to here in sewer. It stank like anything. And when we passed by, they say, "Oh, these foolish Hare Krishnas," you know. So I thought, I mean, who's a fool here? So people don't realize that they're in a precarious position and they're toiling. Like they're very happy when they're working, particularly in Germany. The famous saying is, "Work makes free." In other countries, people work to make a living. In Germany, people work to live to work. It's just the other way around. Work is everything. It's like God. And so, consequently, people are working like dogs. And when it comes to understanding Krishna consciousness, they cannot understand. They cannot understand, which is not unusual. Even Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, some look at the soul as amazing, some describe him as amazing, some hear of him as amazing, and others cannot understand it at all. And that's actually, in the Western countries, most people cannot understand. They may go to church, they may go to the mosque, they may go to the synagogue, but still, they do not understand God. And if I ask you, do you know God? They say no. They're open about it. And I said, I can tell you who is God. And who is God? I said, shall I show a picture? He said, yes. I show him a picture. I said, that's God. I said, no. How do you know if you don't know? Right? You have never seen a piece of cheese in your life. I ask you, do you know cheese? Do you know how it smells, how it looks? No. All right, here's cheese. No, that's not cheese. You see, there's no logic in it. You see, why are they arguing like this in an illogical way? Because their situation is illogical. If you live without the presence of the soul, you cannot have a reason and argument. Religion has to be reasonable. And if there's only one life, and my brother dies of cancer, a horrible death, with 6 or 7 years, you tell me, where's God in all this? I asked this question to a priest when I was only 10 years old. I said, why? Why is my brother suffering? He said, I don't know. I said, but it says in the Bible, everyone reaps what he sows, isn't it, Father? He said, yes, that's true. So what has he sown? Sown, like sow a seed. He sowed a seed. What has he sown? He was just a child when he got cancer. He said, I have no idea. I never thought about it. I said, Father, where's God here? Where's the justice? We know that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Samoham Sarvabhuteshu Namedrastuti Napriya. I'm not partial, I'm equal to all. And common sense, I knew this, I could understand this in that age. God must be equal to all. It's common sense. It's not even extraordinary sense. Common. But in Western countries, common sense is not very common. That is the problem. And so I asked him this question, he couldn't give me any answer. And I said, Father, in my childhood practice meeting, I told him, you just made me an atheist. Because that's the only conclusion. There's no other conclusion. If there's a God, there must be justice. If there's no justice whatsoever, somebody has everything, somebody suffers, somebody enjoys, somebody's rich, somebody always goes to church and he dies a terrible death, and somebody never goes to church and lives happily. So where's the logic in that? You have to come to the conclusion everything is just chance. By chance, somebody's happy, by chance, somebody's unhappy. And so once you go down this rabbit hole, you cannot understand anything about spiritual life. Your religion will not be reasonable. Religion, very clear understanding we have to have religion is reasonable, real religion. That you can penetrate everything by knowledge, according to what is our capacity is, naturally, and according to what our karma is. If we have good karma, we will take the Bhagavad Gita, we'll understand perfectly by looking through the eyes of Scripture. And when ignorance, then it will be hard. When we are a buffalo, we can't figure it out. Just like if you would bring a buffalo here, he could not understand what is going on here. He could not. And so in the same way, if we are not in Krishna consciousness, that means the consciousness is buffalo. We cannot understand even basic things. Like they said, God must be just. And it's interesting, since we are at this point, in the concentration camp, people, my father was there, I've heard about the suffering in the concentration camp, I'm very aware of it. And they were wondering, where is God here? And so the Jewish rabbis, they got together to have a court case against God. God was in the dock. And they were reasoning. There was an accuser, the prosecutor there, and he said, he is not doing anything, or everybody is suffering here for no reason. And so in the end, the judge reclined for a moment, and he came back with a judgment. God is innocent. Everybody was in a shock. And he said, because the explanation was, either God is all-powerful, but he doesn't know what's going on here. Or he's all-knowledgeable, and he has no power to do anything about it. That was their conclusion. I'm serious. This was a very serious discussion. Because you have to think like this. If you are caught in this paradigm, that there's only one life. Once you say, as a church, in Christian church in 530 AD, they decided, by vote, that there's only one life. The truth is never decided upon by a democratic process, such as voting, right? And by the way, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, in this material world, everyone is fallible. And in the spiritual world, everybody is infallible. So when fallible people get together and vote on truth, there cannot be a perfect result. It's just not possible. Everyone is fallible, even the Pope of Rome. Although they say he's infallible, you can point out by history, like the previous Pope said, what happens to the animals? Do they have soul? No, they have no soul. What happens when they die? They're finished. The next one was, the present Pope was asked, what happens to the soul when they die? They all go to heaven. It means every mosquito, every cockroach, the Chinese will be very happy that there are cockroaches in heaven. But otherwise, I don't want to have cockroaches in the heaven. What to speak of the spiritual world? What to speak of the spiritual world? There is no concept. There is concept of heaven. Interestingly enough, in some mystic Christian scriptures, they talk about the have 7 heavens and the 7 hells. It comes from Muslim religion. It is there, and it comes ultimately from Vedic religion. That's there, but it goes only up to the highest heaven, and that's it. And we know that's actually when the whole thing, that's the beginning. The end is actually the beginning of the whole Vaikuntha sphere, and the whole kingdom of God, and the whole actual spiritual life, spiritual sky. That is not known at all. It's not known at all. There's no knowledge. And so, let me think, how did I get there? So, when you're here in the material world, you have no self-realization. I went to Russia. I've been preaching for the last 15 years a lot in Russia. And so I came in Omsk. There's a Vedic culture at the bottom. They found a temple with shalagrams, Shivalingas, in Omsk. And many places in Russia. There's a river that's called Karma, for example. And there's a river that's called Kama also. And so if you go to Russia, you see that they have the same idea, that there's a grandmother, the grandfather, then babushka and diedushka, and then the important people in the family, and there's mother, etc. And then there's uncle, the importance of the uncle, like in India. Uncle is important. And Prabhupada said, blind uncle is better than no uncle. Still important, because if the son is feeling unhappy with the parent, you can go to the uncle. Parents are unhappy with the son, you can go to the uncle. So no uncle is better than no uncle. So in the same way, Western religiosity is a blind uncle. It's better than no uncle, definitely. Because if there is no religion at all, you cannot hire enough police to keep law and order. There's no question about it. There is still keeping people at bay, that people go to church. It's important. And but it is not pure religion. There's not deep knowledge who we are. That if you don't know who you are, then you try to be someone else. It's very simple. So people they look into the mirror. Put a chicken bone through your nose. I've seen that, a chicken nose through your bone. Or widen the ears like that, due to a lack of identity. The Western world is in a permanent identity crisis. That's what's actually happening. And so they try to understand who am I by dressing this way. Fashions is a classical example of women in an identity crisis. In India there were saris, maybe different colors, etc. But in the West, sometimes the skirts are very short and they're very low, and then after 20 years the short skirt comes back, and the whole thing is exploited by the business people, fashions. But it's really, the Western world lives in a permanent identity crisis. They don't know who they are, they don't know where they come from, and they do not know where they're going to. We can see that. We can understand if somebody is eating meat, that his future is not very bright. No doubt about it. And Tolstoy, the Russian philosopher, has said that as long as there are slaughterhouses, there will be war fields. There will be war fields. As long as there are slaughterhouses, there will be war fields. And so people are wondering, why is there war? First World War, Second World War. First World War, 40 million people died. Second World War, 65 million people died. Next one is in front of us. Why is that? Where's God in all this? People don't know. They don't even ask the question. In Russia, one famous writer, he asked the old people, why do we suffer communism with 60 million people dying? And he said, because we have forgotten God. The old people know that. We have forgotten God. But in the West, in present time, Prabhupada said, it's funny, it's foolish to be wise where ignorance is bliss. No knowledge. And so I came to Omsk airport. We were at Omsk, and there was a gigantic sign on the wall. There was a man smoking a cigarette. It was advertisement for Pall Mall. It says, be yourself. Be yourself. Smoke a cigarette. This particular cigarette, then you are yourself. So that's the thing that people they try so hard to be somebody else. It's a fact. But this is because they've forgotten who they are. Very simple. Forget who you are, you try to be somebody else. And so young people, they smear their body with with tattoos all over and whatnot. If you look into the newspapers or on the internet, how people dress and what they do with their body, because they don't know who they are. They try to be somebody else. When it's hard to be yourself, you try to be somebody else. It's hard to be yourself as a spirit soul. Then you try to be somebody else automatically. And so this is what says here. When one deviates from his original consciousness, he loses the capacity to remember his previous position or recognize his present one. When remembrance is lost, all knowledge acquired is based on a false foundation, namely on the body, on the material body. That I live only so long, and in these years I will enjoy like anything. Like one of my family members, whoever it is, may they rest in peace in future, she wrote me that I refurbished my whole apartment, double glazing, everything. Said, now I can die in peace. Now I can die in peace. And it's so sad how people react to the material world, busy making progress, which ultimately is not progress. Because they're going around and around like a hamster in the wheel. The hamster is thinking, I'm working. Everybody knows what a hamster is? It's like a little rat with nice fur. It's like a glorified rat, actually. Hamsters are glorified. It doesn't have a tail. But otherwise, they're kind of funny, and they run around in this wheel. They think, I'm progressing, I'm actually getting somewhere. But somebody from outside sees he's not getting anywhere. He's just staying right there. And so that's the material world. Birth, old age, disease, and death. Birth, old age, disease, and death. There you have it. You know, there was this French philosopher, Jean-Paul Sartre, Camus, an atheist. And he wrote a book, The Myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus is a famous personality in the Greek history. He was condemned by the gods because he laughed when he saw the top god, Zeus, being engaged in conjugal affair with his wife. And he was cursed. We have the same story in Srimad Bhagavatam. And so he was cursed to live a life banned on an island where he had to roll a stone up the hill, and when it reached the top, it will roll down automatically by magic power. And he rolled, and his whole life was rolling up this stone, and it comes down again. So his interpretation was, life is 100% useless. Useless, because it's useless to roll stone up when it comes down again. He said, that's human life, 100% useless. He said, but if you do that which is useless with great enthusiasm, that is the glory of mankind. That was his conclusion. That's glorious. If you do that which is useless with great enthusiasm. That was his conclusion. Actually, there's a much deeper story behind it. Namely, our life is exactly like this. You take a stone and you roll it up that hill, and when you're at the top, you die. And again you're born. And again you roll this stone up the hill, right? Again you poop out. So one after the other. That is actually the idea behind that. It's an interesting idea that there's somebody see a supreme God, not Krishna of course, but some high God engaging in conjugal affair. You were banned on an island, you can't get away, and there's a mountain and you roll up this stone. And when it comes down again, you have to do all over again. There's some idea behind it, you know, that material life is in one sense actually quite useless. And so, therefore, we have to understand that the beginning of material life, which is the end of material knowledge, is actually the beginning of spiritual life. That we understand material life, there is no gain. Absolutely no gain. Whatever we gained, we will lose at the time of death. And like children, they're building these castles on the beach, right? And then when the time comes, the tide comes and washes all these castles away. That's material life. You're building all your castles, whatever it may be, whether you're a big professor, whether you're a big rich man, the tide will come, the tide of time will come and washes all your castles away. So what is the use of it? It is Sisyphus work. You call this actually Sisyphus work, Material world is a Sisyphus work. But if you do these things in the material world, you work, for example, if you understand it can be useful, if you practice Yat Karoshi, Yat Ashinashi, Yat Suhoshi, Yat Pasasi, Kauntiya, that thing, if you understand that all activities in the material world become actually part and parcels of our spiritual life, if we do them for Krishna. That's the idea. Then it's progressive. It's part and parcel of our progressive duties in spiritual life. And that's a position that it says here, living energy or soul is ever existing or eternal. It cannot be lost. But learned scholars say it is not lost when knowledge is not working. Yes, even in our Shishupanishad, it's the killer of the soul must enter the darkest region of ignorance. So the soul, we know, cannot be killed, but if it's falling into utter darkness, it is as good. Therefore, even in the Bible it says, what is it? Fear not those who kill the body. Jesus said, but fear those who kill your soul. Bad association, asatsanga, material association. Fear those who kill your soul. People are not afraid of the material world. We have no anxiety about those who fear or kill our body, actually. We don't have to. But we have to fear those who kill the soul. And so, in our scriptures, the killer of the soul, that's what's stated here. It cannot be lost. And there is a difference between animal and human being. If somebody has no spiritual knowledge, he may be a philosopher. But as Prabhupada joked one time, he's not a philosopher, he's a foolosopher. Prabhupada said this joke, he said he's a foolosopher. Because what is his philosophy? He doesn't understand who he is. If you ask him, who are you? I'm Mr. Smith. I'm Mr. This. Right? And sometimes they're not so sure about. And so when proper knowledge is not exhibited, that means the soul is lost. The real truth is that we are eternal souls. Never was a time that we did not exist, as Krishna says, nor will there be a time that we will cease to be. That is knowledge. And we cannot die because we are part of Krishna. Vivinamsa, it's a part of Krishna, like a finger. If the body is alive, the finger doesn't die. Finger dies when the body dies. So we cannot die. We always have been. And this knowledge is literally unknown in Western countries. Not completely. In Greek philosophy, for example, 3,000 years in Delphi, which is an old famous religious place, the columns are still there. You can see in the wall, somebody chisel into the wall, realize yourself. They understood this. And when even the Roman emperor, Caesar, when he came to the West, when he fought against the Celtic people, he wrote a book about that, the war against the Celts. And then he writes there, they believe that the soul can take, that there's a soul different from the body, and that the soul can take any form of life. And that the soul is going from one body to another. So that was new to the Romans. But the old people, our original forefathers in Europe knew that, because they were actually part of Vedic culture. They had this understanding. They worship mostly Surya, sun god. Sun worship is very prominent in European countries. So they had some understanding, not the ultimate understanding, but basic understanding, because the understanding that I'm not the body, that I'm the soul, is not sophisticated Vedic knowledge. That's just basic Aham Brahmasmi. That's just the A, B, C. And then from there, you can form sentences, you can form whole philosophies, or understand whole philosophies, based on all this paradigm that I'm not this body. And if I don't have this understanding, then I form all kinds of philosophies that are not realistic. Material life is not realistic. They think that they're realistic. They laugh about us, because they think we are fools. How many times in the morning I take a japa walk and somebody opens the window driving by and said, "Get a job, you fool." In Germany. My body is 75 years old and somebody yells at you, "Get a job, you bum," Because they don't understand that we have some knowledge that they don't have. When you hear that, you're not insulted, you just feel sorry, really. And I laughed heartily when somebody told me that, So that's the situation, is that the very basic understanding is that we are souls. And then the next question is, how do we get here? And that's another lecture. I will talk about that, what we know from Vedic scriptures. I'll talk about it tomorrow. But we are running out of time. This much I want to say about the situation now, that humanity lives actually in an intense identity crisis. In the materialistic society, they don't know who they are. They don't know where they come from, they don't know where they're going to. And they don't know who they are right now, what is happening actually. You don't understand the present, they don't understand the past, they don't understand the future. When we come to Krishna consciousness, we say the past is a past. It's almost irrelevant. Not completely irrelevant, it's relevant if we can learn from the past. Otherwise we make the same mistake over and over again. The past is there to learn lessons, right? You did something wrong. Prabhupada said it's only wrong if you don't correct it. If you correct it, you make it, like we have these Vedic chanters of mantras, they chant mantras, and there's a mistake. There's a person who says, hop, there's a mistake. So what is it? This, that. And he just repeats it properly. Then it is not considered a mistake. So whatever mistake one may make, if we actually become introspective and do something about it, then it is not a fault. It's not a fault, whatever fault there may be, because in the material world, every human being is a mixture of fault and glory. Every single one. There's some fault there, there's some glory there. And in the life of devotees, yes, there's also sometimes a fault, but Prabhupada said these are spots on the moon. Like the moon is very beautiful, but it has spots. So we are not concerned with the spots, we are concerned with the moon. And so great souls avoid like anything to see fault. As soon as you say some fault, we had one devotee in our movement, Diva Prasad Prabhu, I remember him, still there. And whenever you say something about a person which was not nice, he would immediately say, but on the other side. But on the other side. He was so positive. He always would argue with somebody, criticize. He always said, but don't forget, he has been serving, doing this service, that service, that service, that service. And that's a wonderful mentality. That's a liberated mentality, that you don't fall into this trap of fault finding, because it doesn't help anybody. You cannot help the person who makes mistakes, basically speaking. You can help him to read Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, chant Hare Krishna, eat prasadam, that you can do, but otherwise you cannot really help people. Say somebody is attached to sex. You can argue up to the rest of Kali Yuga with him. He's attached. Your arguments, even if they're brilliant, will not change in attachment. That Krishna will knock him, don't worry. Somebody chants Hare Krishna and he has some attachment, don't criticize him. He's in Krishna's workshop, as long as he chants and reads, etc. Don't worry about others. We have to worry about ourselves. That's the main thing. And so that's why Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote in the Shikshastakam, he wrote all the bad qualities one acquires in the material world, and he describes what demon is related to that. What demon Like, for example, pride was a demon of pride, the horse demon. And he said we should read like this, that this demon stands for this anatta. Do I have this anatta, and study these anattas that we might have? He said daily, and ask Krishna in a humble way, please help me to get rid of these anattas. That's the way to work on ourselves. We have enough to do in that sense. So I thank you very much. That was it for today. If you have any questions, please be welcome. Yes?
Thank you, Prabhu, for very wonderful class. And as I mentioned that we were there in spiritual world earlier, but now we have come to this material life.
I have so far not understood a single word, I have to admit. You have to speak very clearly and a little slowly so that I can understand what you are saying.
Prabhu, thank you for a very wonderful class. And I will directly come to the
I need a translator. I needed somebody. You understand him? We need a translator. What is he say? What do you say?
So, Prabhu, when we take up Krishna consciousness seriously, we have to face obstacles from so many places. Like, for example, family members. Here in India especially, they will create so many problems.
When we take up Krishna consciousness, then we face so many obstacles from family members and others like that. In India especially.
Mm-hmm.
So, my question is, when you came to Krishna consciousness, way back in 71, how you managed your parents and everything? You can please share this.
When you came to Krishna consciousness, how did you manage that situation? The relatives and all creating obstacles.
Well, there's no such a thing in Western countries because the families are broken. Nobody cares, And so that solves that problem. But sometimes we have seen that there was some attachment there, or family members became very angry, and then some boy has this problem with his mother, and tell mother, I did so many things, and I got out of them. I tried them. Let me try this out, at least for some time. And if I like it, I will stay. If not, I will be back very soon. This is helpful. It's a helpful thought, for example, Because it's a fact, many people, they stay in Krishna consciousness. After some time, they go and do that what the parents want them to do. So instead of saying to the parents, for my rest of my life, I'm going to stay brahmachari up to the point of death, they're horrified. They're horrified because who's paying their bills? Right? So the best thing is, first of all, it's always good if there's a brother there, who can, if he's sufficiently un-Krishna conscious, he will take care of this problem. Right? Is that true or not? And if not, then you have to just see. You may be able that they become affected by Krishna consciousness. I just heard somebody's parents became, who was it? Somebody spoke, one of the devotees on the internet. He said, my parents became, in the end of their life, became Krishna conscious, But it's difficult because, you see, Western countries are very different. It was not a problem for us altogether. We already left home, practically speaking. By 16 people leave. They do their own thing because that's why it's important to understand Chanakya Pandit's instruction that up to 4 years you fondle a child. Because when the child paints on a piece of paper, the whole family claps. Then he goes and paints on the wall, the father becomes angry and he kicks him, you see. He will be traumatized for the rest of his life because he cannot understand why this is good and that is bad. He can't. He can't. I remember when I was young, we used to bring cheese from Holland, because it's right next to us, very big cheese, very cheap. So my father came to the border, And the German custom officer said, Mr. Brinkmann, do you have anything to declare? He said, no. And I was on the back seat. I said, and what about the cheese you have under your seat? The custom officer says, out of the truth out of the mouth of a child. Can I have a look at it? My father had to pay. He had to pay. Then he drove a little bit, and he stopped the car and whacked me in the face. Why did you tell him that? He always told me to tell the truth. Now I told the truth and you're angry. Right? Isn't it? Out of the mouth of a child. You know? See, a child doesn't know what is right and wrong, basically speaking, unless you train him. And he trained me, but then he went outside of the training by doing something that he was not supposed to do, you know, up to 4 years. From 4 to 16, everything has to be logic, reason, argument. You explain why you don't touch the stove. But I want to touch the stove. Why don't you touch the stove? Oh, he never does it again. It's by experience, either by hearing or by experiencing. Everything is explained by 16. Chanakya Pandit says the father becomes mitravan, he becomes a friend. And that means you have to step down from your position and give up your, how do you say, you hang on the children. You have to let the children free, actually. Not the girls, the boys. Girls have to work under the father, under the husband, etc. But the boys, you have to let them go, because otherwise, at least in the West, the family, it will be a huge scene. I went through that, and everybody else went through that. There's a huge scene. You don't want to know, don't what they want you to do, and you slam the door. I said, I had it, I go, bye-bye. And so that's kind of part of Western life. You know, you leave home. And so for Prabhupada, it was, of course, a gold mine, all these people who had no ties. They're not foolish. I mean, a lot of intelligent people out there that left even ultimate college when they saw there's no point in it, it's just materialism, you know. And so it is important for parents also to understand that when the kid is getting 16, they have to be very careful not to impose themselves on the children. They have to allow them to make decisions. You know, it's important. I've visited many Indian families, and I've seen that the father was still, and the mother, you know, and the guy was, he locked himself in his room. I immediately understood what was going on, you know, because they were just overburdening him with making decisions for him till he's 65, practically speaking. Right? So that's the thing, that we have to be sympathetic, naturally. We have to, there was one devotee in the temple in where was it, Vrindavan, and I asked many times, what about your parents? And I asked him, are you the only son? He said, yes, I'm the only son. I said, so how is your father surviving right now in the COVID? He said, very badly. He said, he has no money. I said, if you're the only son, and the father has no way to maintain his wife, you can't be unreasonable. You have to say, what shall I do? I want to live as a devotee. And I suggested to him, in this case, why don't you join the temple? He's a simple guy. Why don't you join the security people? Because many of them, they're chanting Hare Krishna. One is a security guard we have in our ashram. He's writing every day pages and pages, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. You can do that, but you can still be around devotees. Or there's some way that somebody helps you to send at least 10,000 rupees home every month. You know, some arrangement we have to do. We cannot be unreasonable. If you do so, you have the whole village against you. And the Hare Krishna movement gets a very bad name, that these people are irresponsible. The parents depend on the children, often in India, particularly in hard times like this one. You cannot be unreasonable and just leave them. In the West, it is not a problem, because ultimately the government pays for everybody. But here you don't have a social system in place. And so there has to be some consideration that he must send some money home, and maybe somebody can sponsor it. Somebody can sponsor it. I want to be a devotee. if there's somebody who has money, you can approach him through the temple president or something, that some arrangement has to be done. But all in all, by the end of the day, if there is an impediment to be in the material world, you have to make your way. There's no doubt about it. You have to make your way. You cannot be sentimental. I mean, Arjuna, he didn't want to fight against his relatives, which is he didn't want to fight against his relatives. And when I read this verse, that Krishna says you fight for the sake of fighting, and I said, what about the relatives? Many times this question is asked to us, why, if God is God, there's a battlefield, right? But we have to understand, say you're a policeman, and you see your uncle is stealing, you have to arrest the uncle, right? You cannot say, well, he's my uncle. So in the same way, the scene of the battlefield, Krishna, he was a warrior, right? And then you have to fight, because that's your dharma. The dharma of a policeman is to arrest his uncle in this case. Therefore, it's an impurity to let the uncle go. Uncle, I didn't see anything. Please get out of the shop. You can't do that. So we have to penetrate every situation with logic, reason, and argument. And if you don't know, ask somebody, older boy, older devotee, and you can also ask Prabhupada, you can ask Lord Nityananda. Prabhupada told us if there's any problems in our life, he said, do not go to Radha Krishna. He said, they are absorbed in their ras. He said, you can go to Nishingadev, because he is clearing up our whatever karmasayan, whatever karma may be there, he's clearing this up. And so, I cannot give a general answer to this question. Ultimately, it's a question of sitting down with somebody and see the individual situation. That's why it's important to have Vaishnava relationships, that there's trust, that there's somebody you can go to and say, I have this problem, what shall I do? Prabhupada said, unless there's Vaishnava trust, he said, love and trust, I said, our movement cannot develop. He said, our movement cannot develop. When I was a manager, I managed Prabhupada's arrival in Germany, and I had a magnetic board, magnetic? Like a fridge, you can stick magnetic stickers, so I had everybody's name on stickers on this board. And I was managing, here's this department, that department, that department, who was going to go to Prabhupada today for this, that. And all of a sudden I felt somebody was behind me. I said, oh, Srila Prabhupada, please accept my obeisances. He was behind me, and he said, what is that? What is that? His deep voice. I explained, I said, Srila Prabhupada, this is a magnetic, my managing board, I can take a person from here to here, from there to there, from the kitchen, etc. He said, how did that work? I said, it is magnetic. Oh, it is magnetic. He said, can I try that? I said, sure, Srila Prabhupada. He said, all right, let's take this person from the kitchen on Sankirtan. From Sankirtan into the garden. From the garden into here. And he messed up my board, basically speaking, for a minute, Then he looked at me, made a very grave face and said, and all this will fail. He said, if there's no love and trust. Such an important lesson. See, Prabhupada, he did this on purpose. Whatever he does is very on purpose. He immediately gives you a lesson, a deep lesson for life. That all this doesn't work if there's no love and trust. Any other question? So tomorrow we have another happy day. And Monday I will not have any time at all. I leave early in the morning. Tuesday I leave. Hi, Krishna.
I'm not arguing, but I would like to ask you something. You said that boy who was a sincere guy, but you said him to he has to send 10,000 rupees to home because he has to be reasonably. But if he is joining ISKCON, then will Krishna take care of his family, his financial needs?
You told about the boy who is joining and that 10,000 rupees can be given or sponsored. But if somebody is joining, will not Krishna take care of him?
What?
Will not Krishna take care of him if somebody is joining sincerely?
Well, maybe. I mean, Krishna is not our order supplier, Sometimes you say, well, let Krishna take care of it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to make my fingers dirty. Let Krishna. That's Krishna is not meant to be that. He might do that. He might not do that. We have some responsibility. You can't refuse the responsibility. You can't just walk away. And so it may be that somebody has to stay in that environment, but he can chant, he can read, the internet is there, all day you can listen to lectures if you want to, and see lectures, So if it's too tight, it's not that it's a must that everybody should leave home, not necessarily. There may be some case where it's better he stays right there, and works on his parents or his friends in school or whatever, There's no hard and fast rule. It's a very individual situation. Every individual situation is different from another, Generally I can speak, yes, if somebody is completely determined, he should do everything to be in the association of the devotees. But if that's not possible, like Raghunath Das Goswami, he couldn't leave from one moment house, and Lord Chaitanya told him, stay there. But then in due course of time, Krishna made an arrangement, so that he could leave. Hare Krishna. We have to be sensitive. I mean, we don't want to put the parents in distress because of becoming a devotee. We want to make them happy that you are a devotee, So use your brain, and if we can't figure it out ourselves, then we have to take advice. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Krishna. Now you asked a lot of questions, I give you the garland.